Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to our Capital Markets Day 2019. It's really a pleasure to have everybody here, and thank you for signing up and making time today. Just a quick word on what we're doing today. When we originally had a conversation, John and I, on crafting a Capital Markets Day, we realized that one of the questions that comes up frequently from our investors and friends in the investment community is the 5G opportunity, is IoT, what these mean to Clavister, what they mean to business opportunity. So when we sat down, we said, we're going to do a more dynamic Capital Markets Day where we actually do some education. Peter, hi, I have to say hi. It's been a while. Sorry, it's a friendly community. And we realized we needed to do part education and part explaining what Clavister's position is, and then, of course, letting you draw your conclusions on what that business opportunity is. So, as you can see, the agenda today, John will start off. Of course, you all know John, our president and CEO, and he'll be talking about the Clavister view on this threat in the cyber world, how we can be safer. We'll then be joined by Stefan Dahlström from HMS, which is a very distinguished guest, and Stefan, thank you for joining us today. Of course, he's one of our board members, but he is an absolute expert in the IoT space, IIoT space. So he'll give you some thoughts on that and the connected world of intelligent distributed control systems. Again, some of this it sounds very technical, but we made a deliberate choice to say we're going to present some of that to you and explain it so you'd understand it. Next will be Johan Edlund. He's our Chief Marketing Products Officer at Clavister, and he's been behind the dramatic transformation that you've been seeing in the last year and a half, leading our team to deliver a product portfolio. So he's been instrumental in that. And he will talk to you today about kind of a primer and explainer of IIoT and how the security on IoT becomes a critical element. Then we'll take a coffee break. After that, John will give you a primer on the evolving telco landscape, and it's a very fast-moving, changing landscape, and there's a lot to tell you on that space. Then there will be Shemek, our Chief Strategy Officer, who will talk to you about the situation with Clavister and communication service providers. And then we'll have a very open, free, communicative panel discussion, and that's really relying on you to ask some of those questions. I'll facilitate that, I'll moderate that, but we really want your feedback to drive that panel discussion. So please let's have a free-flowing discussion. You can feel that you've really got as much as you can out of the panel discussion. And then we'll have a wraps and a mingle. So that'll be it. So welcome, everybody. I think one of the elephants in the room, let's say, is our new CFO, and he'd just like to wave, but he'll be introduced properly. This is Håkan Rippe, who will be joining us also today. And of course, our board members, Victor and Jan Frickhammer and others. Thank you. I think that's it. I'm going to pass it over to John and enjoy it today.
I don't need that one. I have this one. Thank you, Sam. Welcome, everyone. So, as Sam mentioned, we'll guide you through some of the highlights in some of two very distinguished areas, industrial IoT and 5G and telco space. Before we come into that, I'd like to take the opportunity to just guide you through some of the key strategic updates on Clavister, some generic market update, of course, and with some, give you some rough idea on where we're going as well, looking at our strategy ahead. Feel free to interrupt with questions. Otherwise, as mentioned, we have a panel discussion at the end. So, looking at the cybersecurity market, the general market update, no one have been able to avoid that this is absolutely one of the hottest markets right now. Not a single day without some kind of headline in the news. We won't bore you to death with a lot of number crunching, but just painting the big picture, we're looking at $251 billion market by 2023. The growth rate, 11% compound growth rate, it's very, very, very big spread. You have growth in certain areas with 5-6%. You have growth in cloud security areas peaking at 40%. So you have a massive spread. The average, however, is still a good growth, right? Some other key numbers, just showing you the magnitude of what's happening in this market. The expenditures by 2024, $1 trillion American dollars. The cost, global cost, $6 trillion. Someone told me that's the same amount of money that the combined drug and weapon trade in the world. Then you get sort of the magnitude, right? As we will talk about IoT, 600% of growth in attacks in the IoT space. That's significant, obviously, and it helped drive the industry, no doubt. And quite scary, actually. Only 38% of the organizations claim that they can handle an attack. That means, obviously, that the biggest part of society is left vulnerable, but that's, of course, a fantastic opportunity for companies like Clavister, right? Looking at the motivations behind attacks nowadays, if you just go back a number of years, everyone was, or more or less everyone was associating cyber attacks with, the teenage hacker trying to demonstrate his knowledge, right, in the boy room. That's not the case at all today, obviously. Hacktivism, if you would include that in that, that's only 2%. It's really cyber crime, sponsored crime, either by states or by basically the mob that's driving cybercrime today. So big, massive change in that. Then we're coming into the geopolitical perspective, and this is super, super important for Clavister. And it has turned from being, somewhat of a buy note in the perspective to something that is one of our uttermost important differentiators. I think the question is obvious. Are we really gearing up now for a complete cyber war? Not only between US and China. I mean, we're seeing tendencies between other parts of the world as well. You have all seen the bans, the US bans on Chinese technology. Not only Huawei, but just the other week you had 5 more huge Chinese tech companies being banned. The European perspective. Just in a recent report from the European Union, and I'll come back to this as well when we talk about 5G, the fears are more or less the same. Maybe the European Union are not as distinct as US in their recommendations, but it's the same pattern. We see the same pattern all over. Fairly recently, the European Union set up a cybersecurity agency, headquartered in Athens. And this agency has recently published a policy recommendation. I won't read the entire section, but what's really, really key here is that the European Union is pressing on the fact that member states need to start looking, creating an independence or increasing an independence from outside sources and adding the European context. We're seeing that more or less every day in our business with new partners, new distributors, new resellers approaching Clavister for this specific reason. And given that most of our competitors, they are American, Israeli, or Chinese, there are really not that many vendors left in Europe who can provide the type of security, the type of portfolio, the type of vision we have. It's Clavister. We have our dear friends Sophos, who, by the way, are not European anymore. They were just acquired or bidded to be acquired by a US venture cap firm. So that basically leaves Clavister as the hopefully shining star in Europe. There's a lot of startups, there's a lot of smaller companies besides Clavister, but so far none has proven to show the same type of breadth and depth of portfolio that we can. This is obviously super important. The geopolitical perspective is really driving a great market opportunity for us. To the point where we have deliberately stated that our focus markets have obviously to be within Europe. We have the Nordics, obviously our home market, and we have the German-speaking region, the biggest cybersecurity market in Europe. So Just without going into details, of course, but for the part of the audience that might not know Clavister that well, and for our video recorded audience, basically we've deliberately taken our marketing message from being a tech company delivering technology and features to delivering business continuity, because that's in essence what it's about. Cybersecurity is not a technical feature, it's not a firewall, it's not a product, it's a means to protect business. We are pressing hard on the Swedish innovation, Security by Sweden, the European independence, again for the same geopolitical reasons. And to give you some highlights, we have our history with 20 years of innovation. And this is important, obviously, because contrary to most, there are 300 startups every year in this industry. And many, many billions of dollars pushed into that market from venture caps and from seed investments. We, however, have 20 years of history, so we built the products already. We're continuing to innovate, we're continuing to build them, but we have products. That's the key thing. And to that point, 25,000 of them are in active deployments around the globe. Even though we're limiting our own sales focus to fewer markets, through partner networks, through our global key accounts, we're present in over 150 countries around the globe. The focus markets I mentioned, we have our headquarters up in Örnsköldsvik with roughly 100 people listed on the First North. And since we divested our Chinese operations 1 week ago or 2 weeks ago, our employee count is right now around 150. Again, the Swedishness, the snow, obviously from Övik, the clear statement that contrary to what most people have realized on competitors' products, we have no backdoors. We are the independent alternative. We are the neutral vendor that especially customers within the European Union, but of course also abroad, can trust. That's the key message. So, what have we been achieving so far? Well, obviously we made a massive transformation of the company back in 2017 from having been a pure R&D tech shop for many, many years, building great products nonetheless, attracting fantastic customers, but maybe so being able to scale sales. 2017 came, we started the transition, focusing heavily on go-to-market, starting a journey to really drive growth, and with that get leverage on our bottom line and driving profitability in the end. According to Gartner, a fairly recent report, in one subsegment where we operate, the Unified Threat Management subsegment, they appointed or rewarded Clavister as the fastest growing company in the world in this segment. And also realized that, well, we're still a small player, but in a global perspective, we have established I think it was position number 16, which is, it's a number, absolutely. We are on the radar. 2 last quarters, 38% and 28% growth, respectively. But maybe even more important, 11 quarters now of consecutive growth. In average, 28% growth. And I believe the trends are clear. You see the lumpiness in the quarters, obviously, in any tech company. Q4 is always super strong. People have to spend their budgets, etc., etc. But it's a trend, absolutely. You would probably call this a sustainable lumpiness. Where then going forward, I mean, without exposing all of our secret sauces, we'd like to give you some guidance where we're planning. This is a no-brainer, obviously. I mean, I think everyone buys into this. It's a super hot industry. It is in the spotlight from investors, from executives, from board members, from C-levels, of course the media and analysts. And we have an opportunity, or a momentum rather, where we have 11 quarters of growth behind us now. according to Gartner, the fastest growing company in the UTM segment, we are transitioning from having been a single product vendor to portfolio vendor, portfolio company, which is important. And again, the geopolitical situation really supports our agenda. Based on that, there is really only one conclusion you can draw. We are well positioned to grab a bigger share of the market. That's super clear. There is really nothing else we should do and can do. So with all of that, this is really our agenda going forward. We'd like to establish ourselves as the leading cybersecurity expert in Europe. That's a very, very concrete target. How are we going to do this? Well, there are three key pillars in our strategy. One is, and none of them are really rocket science. It's about continuing the hard work we've been doing now for the past years, optimizing that further, making sure that we operate in a way where we really, really get the return from that. Scaling go-to-market is really the key pillar here. And over the past 2-3 years now, we have seen the clear correlation between our sales and marketing efforts and the sales growth. I mean, that's quite a no-brainer, really, when you think of it. But now we have proof points. We have proof points that where we deploy salespeople more consolidated in fewer markets, it yields return, which is great to see. We have to continue on that track. Otherwise, we just saturate with the team we have. Really, driving sales productivity is about doing two things at the same time: scaling efficiency and scaling sales force. We have decided to do both because we still have a fairly small sales team. We have demonstrated quite good efficiency. We have room to grow with more efficiency per head, absolutely, and we're doing that. There are a number of factors that contribute to that efficiency. Of course, as a new salesperson, you have some lead time before you get experienced with selling our products. The same goes for new partners, right? New resellers. The product portfolio is being expanded as we speak. The competitiveness of that portfolio is increasing. All of those factors together drive efficiency. At the same time, we need to increase our sales force, and we're doing that in selected markets. So we've been, over the past more or less 1.5 years, we've been transforming our scattered sales force into a more homogeneous, consolidated sales force in few markets. And in those markets, we see good return. We'll continue doing that going forward. The second pillar in the strategy is our product portfolio. And as mentioned already, we are transitioning from a single product company to portfolio vendor. Why are we doing that? Well, the answer is really, really simple. When you look at security nowadays, the changes in people's behaviors, users' behaviors, the introduction of IoT, cloud security, new technologies like 5G, etc., all of those taken together create a situation where single point solutions or single products can no more mitigate threats. It's just technically impossible. You need a 360 view, a 360 shield of different mitigation methods to practically and efficiently mitigate threats. We had two choices. We could stay niched with a single product, facing the risk to be replaced, or going the more holistic way, building a portfolio. Despite we're a small company, despite the effort that it would take, we took that deliberate choice. Because we have a fairly strong customer install base already, we have proven that our products are very competitive. We have the opportunity to use our bigger portfolio in two ways. One, as a bridgehead into customers with competitive products, where our complementary products opens the door for us. Where in a couple of years from now, support contracts and maintenance contracts expire, we are there already, and we can start backfilling the customer's portfolio with our products. Second reason is from the partner perspective. We are an indirect selling organization. We sell through partners and distributors. If we have only a point product, partners need to complement that product with products from other vendors. And the risk, obviously, is we become marginal in the end and face getting replaced. of course, we'd like the opposite to happen. That's why Johan and his team and Clavister designed what we call the Aurora Security Framework. That's basically an ecosystem of Clavister products that creates this holistic security mitigation or shield for an organization. So it's all about different use cases, connecting organizations, protecting them, and preventing threats. All of this in a homogeneous, orchestrated, automated way. The product portfolio as such, I won't go into details, but really the transformation is from our original classical firewall product that's been with us for many, many years, still being a good base for all our sales, into a much broader portfolio. Different product families, catering for your identity, catering for the security on your device, whether it's a laptop or a mobile, what's happening in the network and in the cloud. All of those combined, providing you with that full 360 security, managed with modern management tools. And of course, we provide a set of services beneath to help our customers or help our partners to deploy, to be trained on the products and to be properly supported. Third pillar in our strategy, it's really just, within quotes, just operational excellence. And that brings me back to this picture. As we're growing this company, of course, we need to continue having a strict cost control, doing things in the most diligent way ever possible to make sure that whatever growth we're able to generate really creates a leverage on the bottom line. And I think you've seen already in the trailing EBITDA trend that what we're doing really pays off, right? Another aspect of operational excellence is to surround us with professionals at all time. And since 2017, we have deliberately recruited international senior experience, not only to the management team, but to the organization in general. And of course, that helps building best-in-class company. I'd like to introduce our latest addition to our team, our new CFO, Håkan, who
All right, well, thank you, John. And I'd like just to introduce myself real quickly and say I'm really happy to be here. My name is Håkan Rippe, and I joined Clavister in a week, November 1st. So, and my background is this. I've been with primarily I've been working with mergers and acquisitions and financing for the most of my career. The last 10 years I've been with a Swedish software company called Enea, and where the last 6 years I was the CEO of Enea up until beginning of this year. And I got to know Clavister the first time around 2016, whereas we acquired a company, Cosmos, who had Clavister as their customer. And when this opportunity arose, I was actually quite excited to join. And I got the question why I'm joining. So I'm just going to mention real quickly my perspective on this. I'm not going to be very long. So a couple of reasons. First, I think it's about the size and timing of Clavister. Right now, the company is in a very interesting position. It obviously has the technology and the history, not being a startup, but not much more of a mature provider, but still small enough to have lots of potential from a business perspective. Not yet on the radar screens of all the customers. So size and timing is really important. The second thing is the team. I've been really impressed, not only by the management team, but by the staff and the board of directors as well. So I think the company has a team which will continue to be able to drive performance in the future. Growth, the consistency in the revenue growth is obviously impressive. And that points to the fourth reason, which is the profitability improvement potential. Will the company be able to execute on its margin improvement? Things will open up, not only from a financial perspective, whereas the benefits are obvious in terms of cash flow and balance sheets and all that, but also from an operational perspective, opening up business opportunities for the company to continue to execute. And hopefully in the end that will translate to shareholder value. So I'm really excited to join. Thank you, John, for inviting me, and look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you.
Okay.
rounding up before letting Staffan join the stage, just a reminder of our go-to-market strategy or go-to-market model, rather. So again, we're an indirect selling organization, having distributors and/or partners in different size and shape. We've selected 5 concrete industries or verticals, if you like, where we have a better fit than in other areas. Education and public sector and retail and distributor offices are the 2 sectors or 2 industries where we have our legacy. We still have our biggest part of the business. And as you might have seen in our quarterly reports, communication service providers, who was essentially a new industry for us going back 3-4 years ago, now represents around 20% of our business. And just in Q2, we had 290% growth in that area. Of course, from small numbers initially, but really a strong growth driver for us. And then industrial IoT, that you will hear more about today, and critical infrastructure, representing 2 very new areas for us, just a few % of our total sales. And really today, we are going to talk about the 2 latter ones, industrial IoT and communication service providers. From the optics of it, you might believe or think that those 2 are very separate entities or separate industries. Hopefully, at the end of today, after hearing the next sessions, you will see that there are a lot of synergies between those. And those synergies are the reasons why we have chosen to work more in depth with them. So with that, Staffan.
Thank you, John. Very interesting. Good morning, everybody. Thanks, John. So John asked me to come here to talk about industrial IoT, and I spend most of the time probably talking about industrial, but also IoT. But I think it's important to get the context of the industrial market. That is quite different, and I spend most of the time on there. So I'm Staffan Dahlström. I'm co-founder and CEO of the Swedish company HMS. It may be a quite new company for you, so I just have a few slides in describing what we do before coming into the topic. We are connecting industrial devices, machines, to enable communication between each other on the factory floor or in the electrical distribution centers and this kind of applications. We work with different brands, and we've mainly been driving the company from organic growth, and we've been doing some 5-6 acquisitions the last 6-7 years. And as a company history, we are a little bit older, 10 years older than Clavister, and been doing quite well. We have a target to grow 20% per year, and we should have a 20% EBIT margin every year. Last 10 years, we've been on 21% growth on average, so we are getting there. And we are 30 years of business compared to Clavister's 20, so maybe we are 10 years ahead. So maybe this can be speculation of what we expect from John and his team going forward. So we are headquartered in the West Coast center of universe, Halmstad here in Sweden. We have some 600 employees in 16 countries. So this also illustrates that our market is, I wouldn't say global, but international. The big market is Germany, US, Japan. Sweden, as for us, is maybe 4%, 5% of our business. And we sell in around 50 countries. We have installed some 5-6 million products around the world. So we are quite well known in the small niche of industrial communication. And we've been public for 12 years, something like this. So that's a little bit the context. And what we try to do with our customers is that our customers, they either manufacture machines or they own this kind of industrial assets. There's a lot of data in these assets. What we help our customer with is to enable the data inside their machines. And we do this in an easy way, but we will also talk about security. This is a key thing going forward for our customers. And what we try to do is to do this to help our customers to improve their productivity, but also their sustainability. Sorry, I'm fast here. Their sustainability on energy savings and things like this. So this is really the value that we provide to our customers. What's important to understand when you go into the industrial market is that we clearly separate about 2 different segments. We work with makers. These guys are makers of machines, makers of devices. Could be anything like packaging machines, windmills, AGVs, or backup power engines in hospitals, things like this. So this is really the industrial makers. Their problem is that they sell their machine and they want to connect the machine to whatever infrastructure that machine is installed in. Here we have some 1,600 customers, and we are part of their bill of material. So when ABB sells a robot that need to communicate, we get a purchase order for the communication little thing inside the robot. So it's a nice business when ABB is selling a lot of robots. Right now, they don't, so then it's a little bit more difficult in this part. This is 70% of our business. What's interesting also is that we work with the users of industrial equipment. They manufacture things like cars or tires or beer or circuit boards, things like this. And for them, we do communication solutions where they can maybe connect their welding machines with their painting line. These are normally from different vendors using different communications. So from communication point of view, we provide a lot of value to these customers. But as John's saying, we are talking about manufacturing. This is 50% of our business. We talk about energy and infrastructure, smart grid, and these kind of things. We talk about HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. That's really the expensive parts in commercial buildings. And some part of like warehouse, some marine applications, and these kind of things. We need to do communication. And the context we are coming from is really the industrial hardware, where there's a lot of companies using this kind of machines and hardware in paper mills and steel plants. But there's a trend that, this is going too fast for me, I think, that the IoT companies here, they want to use much more of the data that is located inside these machines. And here we also do software components, so you can actually get into getting the data from there. So HMS, hardware meets software, we want to be the guy who actually connect all this data that is hidden inside the machines up to this IoT and cloud system. And of course, security is getting a very hot topic for our customers. But before going into security, let me explain the difference between, we talk about OT, operational technology. This is inside the factory more or less. It's a different universe than what you're used to, consumers, telco, IT, that's different. So IoT is much more of industrial IoT, it's much more of this IT and traditional things from an IT perspective. This is a market that is quite nice, it's conservative. You know, if you own a paper mill, you don't want to have the latest technology. You want to have a good technology that will survive for the next 20 years. So it's quite conservative, it's a CapEx investments, but these guys are not running after the latest technology. But up here, it's much more of IT, fast moving, so it's two different worlds that more or less collide here. Here we see some single-digit growth, conservative going forward, but long-term, automation is increasing year by year by year. And here there are companies saying that there will be billions and millions of devices next year connected. These are conservative customers. We believe that this is growing maybe 10-20% up here. So it's a nice market. But the key thing for our customers when talking about IoT, they really want to go into this cool IoT, Internet of Things kind of things, but it's industrial. What is key with industrial? We talk about industrial robustness. This is not like a laptop. It's completely different environment, and it's vibration, it's temperature. You have 3,000 amps of current going through this welding head or something like this. It's a very noisy environment, but you need industrial robustness. Quality, HMS, we work with 200 ppm, parts per million. So if we make around 1 million products a year, we get, 200 that doesn't work, which is fantastic. In Japan, they request 50 ppm, so we're not fully there yet. But compared to an IT company, if they get only 2 or 3 or 4% back, it's fantastic for them. But for us, quality is something completely different. It's critical application, it must always work, and we talk about real-time demands. This is very important. If you are a welding robot, if the data arrives in 1 millisecond or 50 milliseconds, you will weld in the wrong spot if you don't have real-time capabilities. So in history, this is formulating always on. These are equipment that always work, 24/7, all year round. Maybe they close for 1 week in some application for refurbishment, but most of them they run always. This is very important. In a car plant, we talk about cost of failure. 1 hour of standstill in a factory is $22,000 US. So of course, you don't want to buy some cheap component on Radio Shack to get in here, because it fails, it costs a fortune. You will lose a job if you don't have high quality in this kind of application. What is new here, when we go to Internet of Things, is one more component. They still want reliability, but also security. This is very important for our customers. And if you look at the history of the evolution, in the 80s it was always centralized control system, sensors, everything was connected to one central box, a lot of wires. In the 90s we started our business, the evolution was also coming with field bus technology, distributed assets and inside the plant. But lately it's much more of the technology we use in our office environment with IP technology is also coming into the factory, but normally in special flavors, a little bit more ruggedized, a little bit more real-time characteristics. So we are seeing a situation now with Internet of Things is driving our customers' technology into things like TSN, that's a new Ethernet-based technology. But this is also driving cybersecurity, because customers, they want to do smart connected industry. And connected today means that there are communication that goes on in the factory and outside the factory, and that's the challenge for our customers. And we also 5G coming in as a very nice technology. 5G, you get high data bandwidth, but you get real-time characteristics down to a couple of milliseconds. It's not perfect, but it's way much better than any other cellular technology in the past. So we're seeing that 5G is also coming in here. So for security, this gives the picture. But when we talk to our customers, this is a typical factory installation. I'm sure you've seen this kind of pictures before. And security for these kind of customers, in many cases, they say, what are you talking about? We have a guy at the gate, and then we have a fence around our factory. This is security. And in Swedish or German language, Sicherheit, säkerhet, this means the same thing between safety and security. So there's a lot of misconception that, these are things we talk about Sicherheit, things like this here. Well, this is not security. We talk about cybersecurity. We talk about things here is communicating for wireless technology and expose these kind of machines to completely new threats. But our customers, they want to use this digitalization, but they are far off from their IT department when it comes to how do we secure this kind of things in the factory floor. To illustrate this further, if we look on your IT department in your office, all these things, they know everything about cloud and analytics and all these different IT things. And also they know quite much cybersecurity, what they need to do. They are quite comfortable in this concept of security. What we see with our customers today is that it's a little bit different. There are other terminologies, and the context looks like this. It's a machine. There's not even a USB plug to plug in your test equipment in. It's not IP at all in some machines. So IT find this very confusing. But our customers, what they want to do is they want to use new technology, but the problems they want to solve is quite classical. I would say that this was things that Henry Ford was still challenging with. They want to have reduction in time to introduce a new product. Everything goes faster and faster. Mass production of single unit, that's the key thing for many of our customers. They want to improve their overall equipment efficiency. They want to reduce their energy consumption. They want to have higher quality and increase productivity. This is not rocket science. It's the continuous improvement that make you a little bit more competitive every year. But we have a lot of companies that make the machines. If you sell these machines to Nestlé or Stora Enso or something like this, you normally install your machine inside the line of their production. This means that you also need to guarantee that this is my performance, this is my uptime. You probably need to guarantee this is the output of my part of your production line. The problem we're seeing now is that how do we secure this from a cybersecurity point of view? If you get some virus on the factory network, how can you guarantee your functionality in your machine? So we talk more or less like the shield is up, that we need to have this kind of deep packet inspection and really being clear what data goes in and what data goes out. The industry is really good in making ruggedized products and things like DDoS attacks. never works on our product because they just bounce off. This is normal, but we need to go taking the next step to really say that this data, is this variable really, can you control the temperature to this level? Because this isn't really on the application. So this is something that is quite new to many of our customers, but it's a really interesting market. If you look on this is a survey from Siemens. They are saying that US oil and gas, they are quite fast in deploying digitalization and new things to improve all this efficiency and productivity they want to do. But the security is lagging behind. And they're saying that 59% believe that they have greater risks in their OT environment than the IT environment. That's a lot. They're saying that 61% say that they have difficulty to really handling this cybersecurity risk around the value chain. Think about a factory. It's not a laptop, it's not a cell phone, it's an ecosystem that there's inbound things, there's outbound things. It's pretty complex. And from a security point of view, there's a lot of holes that somebody can create problems for you. And they say that I think all IT department, they have this nice products from companies like Clavister to monitor and check everything. This is not installed in every factory. So we are far away from the IT level on OT. There's a lot of things to do. So this is quite interesting. And they say that the control system, this is like a DCS or PLC, that's really the heart of the control. That's what many manufacturing companies have their secret sauce. How you control your process, that's the super secret thing of your factory. It's not relevant. They don't have good security in that part of the factory, and this is the heart of their business. So there's quite an opportunity for somebody who can move into this industry. When we look on this from our point of view, we come from OT. We are not at the moment, from HMS point of view, security experts. We're trying to learn here. But what we do now when we show this product next week in Automation Fair in Nuremberg with Clavister, so we take one of Clavister's products and we show to our customers, and they are super impressed. And there are two reactions. Our customer is saying, man, this is super complex. And the Clavister team says, are they only asking for these things? This is quite basic. So there's a lack of competence between this. And what we do right now as I would say, proof of concept, we take a Clavister product and there's like an IT interface. We make a new skin on this. So what the user will see is a new interface that we developed together with Clavister that talks the language of OT. And behind the scene is still the same product, but we use this customer interaction in a different way to really make sure they can use the Clavister product in a relevant way for OT. And by that, we think we have a plan, and what we tell our customers is stay connected, but we need to help them with security. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all from me. Thank you. And let's move over to Johan.
Thank you. Thank you, Stefan. So my name is Johan Edlund. I'm running the marketing and products office at Clavister. I rejoined the company a year and a half ago and tried to transform the company into a portfolio company, not a single product company that it was before. And we're taking quite a huge steps the last 18 months with the help of a great team in Örnsköldsvik, but also with a great help from board members like Staffan and Jan Frykhammar to help us to understand where we should put the effort. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do when it comes to industry and industrial IoT and security, to see where we are and where we're going with that. But let's start with what Staffan talked about, the evolution of industry. Well, it is quite an old thing. They started quite early. And a lot of companies are probably still in the 60s with the equipment that they have. And the story to go into industry 4.0 is where everything gets connected. But there is a big resistance on this because they want this 50 out of a million that just continues to run. So what we talk about, it needs to be connected, needs to be sensors all over so that they can measure that the quality is good enough. They need analytics, because when you have analytics, you can take decisions and go to root cause analysis, those kind of things. So the benefits are huge, but the risk when combining IT and OT is also huge. So converging these two technologies is what we try to do. And the good thing with a partner like HMS is that they know OT and we know IT. So let's work together to get the efficiency benefits when moving into the Industry 4.0, because that's what the companies needs to do to keep up with the market that's out there. But like Staffan also said, there are risks. Looking at the risks that comes from cyber incidents in these verticals, you can see that manufacturing companies, they attack them a lot, because you know the people that John talked about earlier, they're not the hacktivists. They're not the guys, okay, look at me, I'm a really cool guy. This is controlling and destroying business for another company. So it's a lot of attacks going on. And of course, if you have a line with 50 incidents of 1 million, you don't want that to be connected and have that risk. So that's the big issue out there. And there are some high direct and indirect costs of this. These are some examples from the last year that, okay, Hydro in the oil industry, they lost from a cyber attack $40 million. You probably heard about Merck, 300 million per quarter because of this. And this was just happening a couple of weeks ago. Airbus was attacked by a cyber attack. So it's all about that. And talking to Airbus, it's the sub-suppliers, meaning that the components that they put into the factory are attacked. And they have the full business line, so then they get a little bit, oh shit, what should I do now? Because I own the line, but I'm threatened by the components in my line. So that's where HMS comes in as well. Looking at some more statistics is that enterprises, 25% of the identify involved IoT, but only less than 10% of the budget actually are put into this. Meaning, of course you get attacked. Of course you get this if you don't cater for it. If you look at IT, as Staffan said, there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of things when you went to protecting ITs. But if you look at IoT, it's low. And then linking these two together, the top barrier for this is the challenge with security when linking IT and OT together. So what is IT and IoT? Well, like Staffan said, it's not the same. Just to take the IT security as we know, just try to put it inside a factory, that won't work, because they won't accept it. They want this. They are slower, if you say it like that, but they are much more in control. They don't trust the normal, put a piece in there and it will work, because it's not. So you need to work with someone that can embed the security into the OT equipment. So that's the key reason for we're doing this together with HMS. We, like Staffan said, next week we're going to present it on a fair. So we've been working on this quite some time. And when you're going to listen to Chemek a little bit later, you're going to see the reason why we can do it, because we know the virtualization. So we know how to embed stuff into another thing, not just take a security box that we produce ourselves with a risk processor, especially built for IT security. We built from ground up the security so that we can embed stuff. We can embed it to the equipment that are 50 of the million on just running. So how can we help them as a company? Well, this box, that's Staffan's box. He has these. We don't do this. We don't do our own boxes either. We embed our software into boxes that someone else do. But at this stage, this one needs to be ruggedized. It needs to be fitted into the factory chain that are already out there. But it needs to be embedded security into it. Because everything you see, these buses that they have, the normal IT buses, that's where the problem can come up. So you need to protect them. So how do you do that? Well, we support the specific protocol together with HMS, the Modbus, the ProfileNet that they already have in the factory. That's where HMS comes in. They do the translation of that. We don't have to do that because we have HMS as the partner for that. But we do the security part. So jointly together, we can, like Staffan said, we can look into the deep packet inspection and look at the application. So we know that Facebook, Skype, those kind of things, they shouldn't be part of this. If someone takes a network cable and just plug in your laptop to get some internet connectivity, we can directly see it. If a sensor pops up that shouldn't be there, we can look at the device visibility and control, seeing that it should only be these sensors, because we know the sensor should be in the factory. That is something that they don't do today. They block IP addresses. That's the security level that they are at the moment. So OT is down here when we talk about knowledge about IT security. We need to step that up. So that's what Stefan said. Oh, this is so fantastic, and we say they are down here. So the step needs to go up because the attacker knows these things. And then it's pure firewalling, secure VPN, those kinds that we've built our success on, that we've done for 20 years. And also, when we do this, you build the factory into different zones, like you do lines of production. You do the network in the factory in the same way. So you control, in this zone, you can only do this amount of networking, and in this zone, you can do this. That's also built into our software, because it started like a router in the 20 years ago, so that's part of our DNA. So we know how to control the traffic based on zones. Then, of course, network attack. That's what we need to protect against. And one thing that is really important is that we're built for this. So we run on the normal Intel platform that you have in your laptop, those kind of things, or in servers or in big racks. But if you're going to build this cost efficient to support ARM architecture, like these boxes or smaller boxes, sensors, you can't build it on the Intel platform because they charge too much for the processor. ARM do the same for a quarter of the cost. So what we're doing is that we have built our software on ARM as well, ported it into ARM, and it runs on that, which Chemik's going to talk a little bit more about in his presentation as well. So how do we do this then? There's a lot of things involved in this, but, well, we have the internet. We have the IT domain, which is also for a factory, for the industry. They're still there. But then we have the OT domain with the buses and also the robots or whatever you call them. So starting off, the normal thing that we do is that we talk IT. So we have the cloud providers, we have the operation centers, we have the data centers. But to use a secure connection with VPN tunnels is of course natural. Not everybody do that today, but that is a natural flow to get into the corporate IT users. And then this is the first step of segmentation, different. So you can do this if you are a laptop, but you can't do this if you're a server, or vice versa. Moving to the next step is, of course, these two are not connected yet. So how do we do that? Well, that's where the competence of our joint effort comes in, because some part needs to be centralized, but some part needs to be as close to these as possible, because you really want to protect that. If you're going to have this 50 over a million, you don't want it to go all the way to the head office, because then this one will go down in some way because someone was browsing too much YouTube clips. That's the fact. If you don't segment it, that can happen, and that's not okay. It doesn't have to be a Japanese customer. So what do you do then? Well, you start segmenting even within the OT domain. So you put the firewall into the gateways, and then you can segment the traffic between the different parts. And of course, also, some part of it, you do it centralized. So you cut stuff already here, and then segmenting. So the closer you get to the edge, meaning closer to the machines, you can put this. Since we can do this in their boxes, which are actually sit as close to the robots as possible, they will get security all the way here. Okay, that's good, but how do we actually see that stuff is happening? Well, and also, how do we actually protect that the users, because the users are the biggest threat today, because you can't really trust everybody that they are who they are. So, biometric, when you log into your mobile phone, now you use Face ID or use your thumb, those kind of things. Yeah, that's good for your mobile phone. But how do we know that these guys are actually also the right guy looking at this Modbus port? Well, of course, since we have this holistic view, we add that on top of that as well. We have the identity and access thing in our box. So everything is connected through a secure network, and we can actually control who's logging into that specific box and make sure that the guy is who he is. And then, of course, you would like to see in the operations center, you would like to see the analytics of that as well. That was what Staffan was mentioning, the things that we're developing together. And we want to simplify it as much as possible. We're going to simplify it even further, but today we're working on this. So as you can see here, you have these different protocols that we're talking about, the Modbus, if you remember that one. In this, you can see the ventilation controller go through the gateway, and you can see it to the Modbus controller. And in this, you see also how they work. And you can add the policies, meaning the dividing of traffic, blocking traffic. You can do it on the namings that they know of. So we need to simplify this as much as possible. And that's where we also have our key components now. We come from a company being a pure technical company. The proud of a CLI interface with just text is still big within Clavister. So what we've been doing now is to take that up a level, to make it as visible and simple as possible. So this is the configuration mode, and then you can see curves and graphs and those kind of things as well. Uptime, you see the fifth of the million in a graph as well. So you can see both the management and the analytics. So that's how we do it together with HMS, and that's what we're going to present next week as well. So we're going to take the simplicity of what they're used to, and then visualize what they can actually use the boxes with the security on top. So they don't get attacked. They don't spend this 11%. They should spend a little bit more. So what can we do to offer this? Well, we have this security porn framework, which is we're controlling the business continuity with the orchestration automation. It's already in there. You see it. And we do this by doing the use cases. We connect the machines, we protect them, and we also prevent it from not happening. So that's on the use case level. And we do that with our portfolio. And as Jan mentioned, we have all these different flavors of the portfolio. And like Jan also said, is that we started a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago, we started with this. So as you can see, we have been doing a little bit of our homework for the last 18 to 24 months. To be much more compatible with the need out there. So we added, together with our sister company, Phoenix ID, we added how to recognize that the user are who you are. On the devices itself, we need to control that as well. And then cloud services. Some part needs to be in the cloud because that's where it should be, and also we need to look at the cloud. So looking at industrial IoT, what parts can we reuse? What parts are we using in the solution? Well, as you can see, the portfolio fits in to the industrial IoT as well. These are the parts that we're using, or components that we're using when doing this together with HMS. So there's a reason behind with taking a portfolio approach. With only doing this, we couldn't have done the full solution. We could have done part of the solution, and then someone else might have done the full. So it's the reason behind it. And Shemik's going to show a similar view when he talks about 5G. You can see the resemblance between these two things. So the thing that we develop through normal enterprise runs into another vertical, which is industrial IoT, which also is being used in 5G. So that's the whole, the flow of the security framework that's in there. So how have we started doing this on a product strategy level? Well, we steal with pride, copy exactly, that's the word I'm used to using, because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. So Staffan also brought in 3 E's into our company, which is really good. So we're talking about enhancing products and business to make sure that what we do a little bit better. That's the framework. So when going out to normal enterprise, we have enhanced our products with the simplicity of the analytical tool, those kind of things. But we also need to expand in some areas. where we see that our products can actually be used to another vertical, or a new vertical can be put into our product. So that's expanding the business, but also exploring into new areas. And when Staffan entered our board, of course, industrial IoT was something that we started talking about heavily. So we need to see how we can expand into this. But it is a slow business. It takes some time to get the business. If you look at Staffan's great graph, it took some years before it starts moving. So we're working on trying to get the same thing within industrial IoT and security. But it's actually then putting that into the explore phase as it is now, because we need to do this together. Then when we have successes, it will move upwards in this graph. That's how we work with our product strategy within Clavister. You're going to see similar view when talk about 5G as well. So how do we do this? John has talked about our go-to-market model with the normal, with the distributors. But in this case, when looking at industrial IoT, there's no distributor involved. We work with the OEM, with HMS, who goes out to their customers that he talked about, the users and the makers, that then will use the Anybus switches with our software inside. And just to summarize a little bit of our uniqueness, why we can do this. Well, the trustworthiness of being Swedish is good, especially for the European market. We have a complete portfolio now, meaning that we can actually deliver this, not just say that we can, because it is a full scale of stuff, and it can be embeddable. And also OEM, that's a tricky word to say, to do it on an OEM level, meaning that our software is quite easy to make an HMS brand if that's needed, or a Siemens, or whatever, because it's built on that sort of system. And with the simplicity in the configuration and with analytics, then they can see what's happening in the factory, and they can see that threats are not coming in. And this is something that I always try to say. Our customers, because of the closeness to our customers and the way we treat them, we score 96%. I'm an Apple guy. I don't know if you've seen Steve Jobs and Tim when they do this keynote speeches. He always starts with the number of how successful they are with the customers. They are 95, 96% as well. We love this figure because that means that we treat them as good as we can and they get help from us. When now the companies are moving to the US and to China and to Israel, the closest to European, and to make sure that we can actually help them, are trickier for them. We love this number. So that's what I would like to talk about today, and about industrial IoT and the security that we try to offer within this area. I'm going to stay for the panel debate, but otherwise, thank you. And I think it's coffee time now.
Let's jump into the next part, talking about 5G and communications service providers. I will start by giving a bit of a primer on 5G and the latest in mobile communication, and obviously the challenges and the cybersecurity threats that arise from that. And then Przemek will introduce to you what we are doing explicitly for this market with our partners. I'm not a radio guy, and I don't want to be challenged by questions on frequencies or whatever. That's not my home turf, but I'm still trying to just guide you, giving you the waterfall from the big context down to how this affects technology, how this really creates cybersecurity threats, right? So I think everyone is agreeing that 5G is really happening now. It's been in the progress for many, many years, but this year is where operators are really deploying 5G networks. Just as a backgrounder, the 5Gs from the fun old analog systems developed by the Ericssons of the world, or Ericsson specifically, through the 2G and 3G, 4G, and now with 5G systems, where really the key differentiator that most people will associate 5G with is, of course, performance and speed. And just as a matter of comparison, downloading a full movie in high definition, how long would it take? In 5G, 1.5 seconds. Using 1G technology, 4 months. Then you get the concept. It's really, really fast, obviously. The other concept of 5G, what it brings is something called low latency. Latency is basically the delay it takes for signals to be transported in a network. This is super important in a lot of the new use cases that 5G brings. Connected cars, autonomous vehicles. Staffan introduced the concept of a welding machine that communicates, and 1 or 2 milliseconds wrong, you're taking the wrong decisions in a car or in the machine. Third component that 5G brings is dense connectivity. So basically moving from some thousands of devices to 100,000s and millions and even billions of sensors and IoT devices that use 5G as the carrier. Now, to do all of this, again, not dwelling into details on frequencies too much, but just establishing the fact that to realize 5G, you're using different kind of frequency spectrums that were not really in the workings for 4G and earlier radio events, where you would have classical, more like 4G type of signaling or radio, where you use low frequency cells with long range, covering large areas. But on the other side of the picture, or the other side of the coin rather, something called the millimeter wave cells, high frequency, super high frequency cells that gives you that massive capacity, but as a drawback, you get short distance, right? That's a compromise, that's a drawback. To deal with that, the industry is deploying radio base stations en masse. You can't really just use the classical model of a single tower somewhere out in a forest covering a huge area. You need massive amount of radio cells. And those are typically deployed on buildings, in arenas, in shopping malls, in light poles, if you would believe the visions. And with that type of infrastructure explosion, of course, it creates a massive challenge for security. Previously, you would have your tower. It would be circumferenced by a fence with a lock. That's at least what the operators believe, that they are secure enough. But now you have suddenly a radio base station from an operator that could be installed up here in this roof. And when this building, or when everyone leaves here, someone remains, plug in a laptop, voila, you're into the mobile network. It's really that easy, unless you have security. So what's the outlook? Well, if we can talk about hockey stick, this is hockey stick for real. The outlook from Ericsson, latest Ericsson mobility report from June, prognosis that by end of 2024 we would have close to 2 billion 5G subscribers. And then we're talking about mobile subscribers in the perception of users. Then we're not talking about machines. Then you would add a couple of billion more to that. Already end of this year, we would be seeing around 10 million 5G subscribers. Some operators are quite advanced, especially I think it is SK South Korea Telecom that already have some million subscribers for 5G. How will this change mobile data? Well, obviously 5G per se is a data-intensive method or standard that allows you to drive mobile data. So as a consequence, ability drives the ability of the network drives the demand, and demand drives ability. What will happen, obviously, is, and we've seen that already in 4G and the earlier transitions as well, if you can download a movie on your handset in 4K definition, you do it. And when you start doing that, you need to add even more data. And then you have the next generation of video. And really video is the key driver for mobile data. If you've followed Clavister for a while, you know that parts of our business model in the communication service provider segment is really driven by mobile data. The more mobile data, the more license money we foresee. So this is obviously good news. But as you see, the lion's part of mobile data will still come from the classical networks, 4G and others, for a long time. And that's fine. I mean, we're agnostic. We don't care. 5G is not a technology that is a requirement for Clavister to succeed in this area, but it's a driver. It's a clear driver. It's a catalyst, but it's not a requirement. The new cool use cases that 5G promises, we spoke about them. Industry automation, robots that communicate with 5G, using 5G. Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, telemedicine, all of those use cases that have one thing in common. A lot of traffic is generated, the demand of low latency is there, and it requires high density. We're talking about billions and billions of devices. The industry value chain. This is from our friends at Redeye in their report. Just to get the full picture, obviously the device manufacturers. Samsung was early out with 5G handsets. The operators, of course, the equipment vendors, and then the component providers, where Clavister is one of them, Enea another one. And this fits our go-to-market model quite nicely. The equipment vendors are typically the customers that Clavister would like to address. We would be in a harder place trying to address the mobile operators directly. We don't have the size, the scale for that, at least not right now. Being embedded in a Nokia or an Ericsson ecosystem, of course, that creates scale for us and leverage. There are three key technology implications that 5G brings. Implications or requirements, you could say. One is super clear, virtualization. Just the sheer nature of a 5G network cannot be built on old technology, old hardware-based, appliance-based technology. It would just be too costly, too much capex. You won't get the elasticity, you won't get the flexibility that software, however, brings. So software-defined networks in the context of virtualization. That's one of the most distinguished features in a 5G network. Virtualization is already happening in 4G, but then it's a cost saver. In 5G, it's a requirement. Second component, something called network slicing, being able to efficiently group your radio frequencies and group your services in a very efficient way to provide different services, different quality levels for different applications and use cases. That we won't touch too much of today. This, however, mobile edge computing, is the third technology consequence of 5G. Again, keep in mind that because of the nature of the radio, you have to push devices closer to the consumer, closer to the subscriber. In previous radio technologies, you could live with having all the traffic from your handset, from your machine, or whatever it was, through your antenna to the mobile core network, which might be one or two central data centers in a country. That's fine if you're browsing a slow web page. You don't really notice the latency. However, again, for an autonomous car where 1 extra microsecond is the difference from a crash or not of the car, you need equipment closer to the subscribers. With that, you open up a can of worms of security issues. And the industry's term for how you deal with this is mobile edge computing. Basically, computing resources located at the edge of the mobile network, doing services for whatever use case it might be. That creates a myriad of opportunities for security companies like Clavister. You need security not only then in the mobile core network, you need it everywhere at the edge. Looking again, some geopolitical or geopolitical perspective of it, a very recent report, 9th of October, from EU, that looked into the cybersecurity risks of 5G. And there are no surprises. I mean, we all know this by now, but the good thing is this is not us saying it or some other security vendor saying it. It's the European Union, the researchers, the full community that just establishes that these are really the challenges in 5G. Three concrete threats. Confidentiality, basically someone being able to spy on your traffic, eavesdropping of traffic, listening into other people's conversation or communication between devices. If that is a production communication from an ABB robot, if you listen into that, you might get a good understanding of what's happening in the factory, right? Availability, basically if someone uses the modern threat tools or attack tools, you could literally shut down a mobile network. And then we're not talking about the issues with someone not being able to call home and say, hey, I'm late for work. We're talking about factories shutting down because they can't communicate anymore. Third one, integrity. That's even worse because that could really cause severe disruptions. Basically, you take your communication, you interrupt it, you change it, before you send it further. And again, taking the HMS perspective, a robot that communicates saying, I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive, where maybe it's not. Someone's just pretending it's alive. This was exactly, in a completely different context though, but this was exactly what happened in Iran, in the Stuxnet attack, where you launched a malware that caused the Iranian uranium centrifugators to start spinning. The control centers, they said, all good. That's where you manipulate integrity. You just change the communication so it looks either normal or bad, depending on your desire. So that's the three big threats. Okay, who are the actors in this? Well, again, the hacktivist groups, yeah, they are there, but the threat level is not that big, actually. It's the organized crime and nation-state actors. Those are really the threat groups behind this. So all in all, 5G presents fantastic opportunities, but the threats are so much more imminent than what we would have seen in the old style 4G and behind networks. What we will be doing is presenting to you now with Przemek the role that Clavister plays, not only in 5G as a specific component of it, but in the communication service provider arena in general. So please, Przemek.
Yes. Thank you, John. Any questions so far? No? I have one. How does it feel to be a shareholder in such a great company?
Depending on when you bought the shares.
And that's a very good answer. And I think what we hear is to give you answers to the questions that you may have. So since I haven't heard any so far, you are most welcome to ask.
We're going to bring that into the panel discussion.
Okay. But the thing there is, we have all this technological advancements, and what's important is how do we stay on top of it? How do we see the value that we can provide and we can monetize at the end? And that's important thing. So if you look at what happened with the company over the last 2 to 2.5 years, we've been realizing the strategy of executing the sales in our typical cozy environment, which is the enterprise. And this is going very, very strong, and we are investing a lot to make sure that it's even stronger. But what we talk about now, today, is about how do we build scaling engines? How do we go outside of our organic growth capabilities that reside within our sales teams? And we tap into something that gives us potential to go even further. And the 5G is one of the examples. And I would say, if we talk about communication service providers, then what we look at right now is something that doesn't have communication because it's just one of the elements, but it's about service providers in general.
not only telcos. 5G is one of the examples. And I think, John said about all those potential threats. And there is this great website by NetScout, which you are not going to see now because we don't have internet connection. But I'll be happy to share with you, because what it does is it shows you in real time the actual attacks that are happening all over the world between the countries and so on. So this is not something theoretical. This is not something that we protect ourselves against because we think it may happen. It is happening every single minute as we sit here. This is happening. Thousands of users of Vodafone last year have been cut off from service because they have been attacked. Last week, Amazon was having a massive attack, DDoS attack, which caused their S3 instance, which is one of their cash cows, to slow down and shut down in certain cases. Same thing with Google. This is happening all the time. Amazon and Google are not communication service providers, but they are service providers, and they tackle the same problems as everybody else. And that's and those are the things, and those are the reasons why we want to stay relevant, how we want to tap into that potential. And it's so fantastic that we can be part of the game, because we are basically protecting from the evil. This is the way I see it. That's the mission that we have. It's not only about making money. It's about making sure that we live in a more secure world, and our kids are protected from that. If you look at the perspective of, let's say, 15 years, you were going to the office, you were having fantastic infrastructure, you were having a laptop, internet connection was a luxury at certain places, and then when you were leaving the office, you were cut off probably of all of that. And then over the course of the years, it completely changed. So you were sitting in the office where you had boring equipment and boring IT, and outside you had something fantastic. And you created data, you created videos, and you created all this drive towards what 5G becomes, is how do we supply more data to those guys? Right now, over 50% of traffic of the internet is YouTube. I don't know if you knew that. Yes, but this is changing, So originally, as I said 15 years ago, most of the traffic was generated by enterprises. Then we turn into consumer era, in which we are right now, still, where consumers are generating most of the traffic and most of the data, like videos, for example. But this is shifting. So we're going back to the point where not the consumer data is the most of the data, but machines talking to machines is going to become more and more important, and this is going to rule the world in terms of data consumption. So how do we tackle this? You've heard a little bit of story from Staffan about how HMS is connecting and making sure that this is possible. You've heard our story from Johan about how we are actually making sure that connectivity is secure, because the underlying catastrophic results may be really, really bad. And John told you about, 5G, it opens up all the doors for us. So how are we going to stay relevant in that picture? So I'm sorry, but this is really ugly picture. But this is the best I could find, because all of the others that were showing 5G architecture were very technical. What I wanted to show you guys here is that how does it work in a real life? Okay, so we have a car that connects to the cell. We have a school. There's a guy talking. There is a lamp that sends signals about the bulb that's in it, whether or not it needs to be replaced. There are cars talking to the cars because they need to know where they are, because they are autonomous, right? There's a home. There's the office, there's a factory. All of it is just real life scenarios, right? And what it does, it creates a lot of possibilities, but also a lot of threats in terms of how you can tap into that potential. Just last year, Jeep has been hacked. 1.5 million vehicles were subject to the hack, which was allowing the attacker to control acceleration, steering, braking, all of those things. Imagine that. I mean, this is real thing. And you know, from the automotive, which is let's say a subset of IoT, industrial IoT, this is very similar to what we see in the factories. You know, car manufacturers are not really there with understanding what it is that they need to do to protect their assets from those kind of events. And this is creating a lot of, as I said, opportunities, but also a lot of threats. So on top of that, you have a network, you have your Telia subscription, but you need to connect to other service providers, right? So you need roaming. And this is another channel where threats potentially can come in. And then everybody wants to access the internet, right? Which becomes a fundamental building block of the 5G network. And there, everyone's connected, and everyone is trying to get access to different things. Some people are doing this because they just like watching YouTube videos, but some people, like governments, as you saw from John's presentation, are doing this on purpose to manipulate things. And that's what's happening. So in all of those cases, if you think about all of the different touch points, all of the different use cases that you have within 5G environment, you need certain qualities. And John said about virtualization, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about it later on, and also how do we secure those. So everywhere you need virtualization, I'm going to say why, and you need security. And the question is, what kind of use cases does it create? So this is a little bit boring, but you need to understand that those are industry recognized use cases within service provider environment that need to be addressed. So we're talking edge security, network edge. John said about this a little bit. Backhaul, I'm going to explain all of this in a little bit of details later on. But the question is, where are we relevant in that picture as Clavister with our Aurora security framework portfolio? And the answer is everywhere. We are addressing all of those use cases within 5G and 4G. And whatever service provider need there is, we have a solution for it. So we talked about virtualization a little bit, but you know, the key element there is the old world was all about we have specialized hardware that has specialized software. They are bound together very much, so-called black boxes that do certain things. And then when you have the scale that you need to deliver all those data and the transmission and everything else, this becomes prohibitively expensive. So the virtualization came into place where you can actually have the box and you share and you divide resources within it. But for most of our competitors, this is very, very difficult because what they've done at the beginning is built their architecture and their solutions around those black boxes. So they derive extra value from selling specialized hardware with specialized software. But we are winning because we don't have to do that. We can run on any kind of platform, and because we are built from ground up as a virtual platform. So that's our advantage. For us, it's very easy. For them, it's very difficult. And we see deals that we are winning against our competition just because of that. So that's very important to remember. Of course, everybody knows about our relationship with Nokia that goes a few years back, and but just wanted to make sure that we understand why Nokia decided to work with us and why other companies that I'm going to talk about later on also decided to work with us. And that's because of our virtualized nature, and that's because we beat everyone else in terms of our performance in some areas. And that's very important. And this is not just us saying this. This has been confirmed and tested by Nokia themselves, but others as well. So this is our competitive edge. And if you look at the original picture, all these data points, cars talking to cars, machines talking to machines, all the data that's flowing, this becomes a factor of a decision. Because if you can't provide that kind of security, that kind of throughput in your security solution, then your entire 5G network, regardless if it's able to process 20 gigabits per second, is just useless. Because that's the weak point. So this is important to remember. Couple of slides. This is really boring, but I want you guys to understand what happens. So backhaul security is when there is a mobile phone talking to the base station, and the base station sends signals to the core network to be sent elsewhere. What's important, again, from the perspective of virtualization, is that more and more those networks are shared between operators. So operators they say, okay, let's build a tower. They build a tower and they share resources on it. It's not one operator's tower as it was 10 years ago. Virtualization comes to place there, network slicing, making sure that we can separate different traffic within the same infrastructure becomes very, very important. And of course, you can do it using traditional ways. As I said, our competitors are more than happy to give you a big iron, put it there, and say, okay, guys, this is going to do everything. And it will. But what's the cost? What is really the choice there? And that's one of the other reasons why we work with our OEM partners, because they see the benefit of what we propose in terms of virtualization. Then we add core security. So this is internet. All the threats that are coming from it, all the traffic, you have to make sure that you understand what is happening there, that you can, in real time, assess the threats, that you can react to it. So there's this whole analytics part that comes into play. It's no longer enough to have just a firewall that you set up, you set policies, and you say, okay, it's going to do the job, right? Because people are very creative. So they come up with the new stuff. And you have to have the engine that's able to analyze the threats, that's able to react to it, or at least give you a heads up of what's happening and give you ability to react. And that's important from all the angles, but core security, where you have that interface coming from outside into your network, that's specifically important. This is an interesting set of numbers. Remember, we were talking for, I would say, years now, what's going to happen with the traffic demand in the networks. We had a bunch of analysts telling us, okay, this is going to grow like that. That's going to be exponential growth. It's going to be that many gigabits, and so on and so on. So now, finally, we have data that's coming from the operators. This is not analysts anymore. This is the operators saying, okay, this is the traffic that we predict after we deploy the network in the first year, second, third, and fourth. This is, let's say, a mid-size operator. This is live data from one of the prospects that we have. So you see that in year 4, they expect to have 4.5 terabits per second traffic in their network. That's coming from all these elements of the picture that you saw at the beginning. And that's important. And those are just two use cases, the core network, GI core network, and the backhaul. So all the traffic that goes from the towers to the core network. And those use cases, there's more. So another one is roaming. We talked about roaming, okay? This is another entry point. So you have to monitor what's happening on that interface and make sure that bad guys are not going through it. So that's what we're doing together with Nokia. We're securing that roaming interface for the service providers. And then edge security. And we're going to stop a little bit here because this is important. John talked about all the latency that's very, very low, that's needed, for example, for connected cars to talk to each other. To achieve that, you cannot have a route that goes from the car to the base station, to the core network, to the base station, and to the car, because it's too long. You know, those 10 milliseconds, they make a difference between life and death, basically. So the edge computing is about to bring that much closer to the user, which in this case is car, or a machine on the factory floor. So edge computing is extremely important because it kind of offloads the core network and makes sure that you have those services and this latency and the speed that you need in this specific place. And that creates, again, lots of opportunities, but at the same time, lots of threats. If we talk about edge computing, this is, you know, there's a lot of elements of growth in the 5G ecosystem, or let's say service provider ecosystem. But edge computing is one of those that are having a biggest growth because of the sheer scale of it. So one of the things are obviously the antennas that you have to place everywhere, and they have to be thousands and tens of thousands of them. But the little data centers, that's that size, that sit next to the antennas, and they have the services. This is the reality of edge computing. They will be, there will be thousands and thousands of those, and that's just the hardware. But you put software, you put different applications on top of that to make sure that all those use cases that we talked about are realized. And that's the predicted growth over the next 5 years. Interesting slide is showing within the edge network, within the edge computing, what are the applications that are going to consume the most of the bandwidth or being used the most. So connected cars, right? We see security and surveillance, obviously. Critical infrastructure, environmental monitoring, like water facilities, power plants, things like that. This is very important because, as Stefan was discussing, all those elements are industrial, are IoT basically. Different flavors, but the same principle. So this is why we look at IoT in general, industrial IoT being part of it, but also automotive, connected vehicles, autonomous driving, as another scaling engine that we're trying to address through our approach that you've seen earlier. Going forward, service domain security. So you have the network, you have all the access, you can connect your mobile or whatever device this is, or your fridge, into the internet. But then in the network, you have all the back office systems. For example, DNS servers that are translating IP addresses and things like this. When they get hacked, all the other things or all the other elements of the architecture, they just don't work. So that's another use case where we are very present. And this is a very specific use case because, for example, when you have core network security, we are deploying several firewalls because there are several interfaces in the network. This is hundreds in the numbers, right? So that's how dense this topology and this architecture becomes. Okay, before I move there, so you see Nokia, Ericsson, and Tata. Those are the partners that we work with on those use cases that you saw. Obviously, Nokia is one of the most advanced, and we have the longest relationship with them. But we have business coming from the others as well, and for the same reasons. So we're going to talk a little bit about this later on. This is one of the examples on the border between service providers and communication service providers, and specifically takes into consideration our virtualization capabilities or demands for that are on the market. Software-defined networking. Companies used to, especially big enterprises, used to have their own networks, or they were leasing lines to connect different offices, making sure that that they have reliable connections, that they can do video conferencing and everything else. But with the growing demand for data, this is becoming more and more and more expensive to the point where very few can afford it. And the concept of software-defined networking came into play because what it does, it takes the concept away from the black box philosophy, where you had a black box that did things for you, and then if you want some other things to be done, then you had to put another black box on top of it, and another, and another, and another. This is actually saying, okay, in general, why don't we put a standard hardware, whatever it is, and make sure that we have software that actually works on it, regardless what the hardware is, and can deliver the results in the same way like in the dedicated networks, for example, MPLS. So this has become a concept, and enterprises became to they started to implement this, but it was pretty apparent very soon that you need service providers to be part of that game, because if you need scale, then building this kind of infrastructure, even though it's cheaper than doing it on your own, than doing it in the old way, is still too expensive. So communication service providers in general became very attracted to that idea, and now they are offering this as a service to their enterprise customers. And this is one of the biggest growing areas in terms of how operators, how telecoms are building up their revenues going forward. And there's a lot of companies out there that are trying to do this, and we work with some of them. So Nokia obviously has their own part of company that does that specifically, and within the framework of our cooperation that we are trying to expand, and we are expanding going forward, we work with them to address this specific use case. This use case has two flavors. Johan was talking about Intel, that's very good and proven and is there for years, but it's very expensive, versus ARM, that's also proven, there for years, but 4 times cheaper. So what ARM decided a few years ago is, okay, we need to, because of that trend, because of virtualization, because of need for software-defined networking, we need to figure out a way how we can put a competitive offer on the table that's cheaper than Intel, and at the same time delivers the same capabilities or even more. So they started to build the ecosystem of the partners. So they said, okay, this is our silicon, this is our processor that's going to do all of that. But this is nothing without all the use cases, all the software that you need. And specifically in the virtualization world, we're talking about VNFs, virtual network functions, that you put on top of the computing power that you have in those devices. And this ecosystem was brought by ARM to the point where when they go to, for example, telecom operator, and they say, guys, this is our alternative, this is our stack, coming from the silicon all the way to the value that you derive from the software that's there. And by the way, those are the guys that will deliver it to you. ARM is not a transaction part. ARM makes sure that those guys, which I will talk about a little bit more, are actually able to deliver that ecosystem into the telecommunication network. So we announced, I think it was back in June, strategic partnership that we signed with ARM, so we became part of that ecosystem. Telco Systems is one of the companies, one of many, many companies within that ecosystem that actually does that. So what they do is they take this hardware, which is very, very simple, out of the box, off the shelf, commercial off the shelf platform, and they stack it with different software, and they put their orchestration engine on top of that, and they deliver it to the telco and say, dear telco, this is going to do the same things that Intel does, 4 times cheaper, and if you want to do virtualization, because you announced that you want to do it, there you go. So we work with Telco Systems and ARM, and we talk directly to very, very big operators, very, very big telcos that have already announced publicly their virtualization strategy. So that's one of the concepts of go-to-market, one of the scaling engines, additional scaling engines that we have within that ecosystem. We also built what we call, together with Telco System, we built a white box concept for tier 2 and tier 3 operators that don't even have resources and people to really even conceptualize that kind of stuff, but they want to make money on it. So they are looking for the solution that's going to be kind of out of the box solution that will deliver those capabilities to them. So that's another go-to-market approach that we have with them. And specifically our relationship with ARM, if we talk about other elements or other possibilities that are enabled through connectivity of 5G, like IoT, like automotive, like connected vehicles, all that stuff, this is what ARM does. So our relationship with ARM is threefold. We concentrate at first, just to focus on that, on what we can do for service providers. We have very intensive discussions about how do we put together with them our joint proposition towards IoT and industrial IoT specifically. And then within IoT space, vehicles or next generation vehicle, autonomous vehicle computing platform is another discussion point that we have with them. So by having the relationship with ARM, we are tapping into the ecosystem. We are building proof points right now, and we have a deal with ARM that we will be taken by them to all of the other partners that they have within their ecosystem to deliver that kind of functionality. And ARM just released, I think a month ago or 2 months ago, a release that that talks about our relationship, and they say there specifically that we are the only cybersecurity platform vendor that's working on ARM right now. So that's significant in its way. We were talking about these white boxes and things that are making it happen actually. So the concept of universal customer premises equipment, UCP, came to place, replacing all the black boxes, making sure that, okay, this is a standardized hardware that has a different software functionalities on top of it. And it became so popular, and it's not a concept anymore. There are real life deployments that are happening in the world, and this market is supposed to become $1 billion market very soon. What is driving it? Low cost, as I said, comparing to the old school or the black box approach. You take very simple hardware, and you have to have the software that's able to run on it. So what we do is, because we have our platform developed from scratch with our own operating system that is extremely low footprint, so takes a small amount of resources, because those boxes, they have their limitations as well. And you cannot put, for example, our competitors' software platform on top of those boxes because it's just not going to fit. So that's our advantage, and that's why we are talking to ARM, because ARM is all about how small you can get and still do the job. That's where we come in. Shared resources. So, caring is sharing, but that's the philosophy of the networks that we have right now, and making sure that you are actually ready to deliver a network infrastructure to your customers, but in an effective way. So one physical resource can be shared between different customers without them even knowing about it. That's a great concept, because you can multiply your revenues and at the same time cut your costs, but you have to have an engine, software engine on top of that is actually able to support that. Oh. There you go. So again, the concept of virtualization on a platform that does that from the ground up was built to support that kind of use cases years ahead of time. But now this is the situation where we actually see it working. And then service on demand. So you can imagine that today an enterprise wants a certain type of services within the UCPE, but tomorrow it may be different, or it may be a different configuration. So you need to be able to shift and kind of play with it. And what we do with our infrastructure and with our portfolio, we offer not only the software solution that can reside on UCP, but the software solution that can reside at the same time in the data center at the same time in the public cloud, and through the combination of those, deliver the result that the end customer, which in this case is enterprise, needs. So we can be very elastic, very flexible about how we deliver those functionalities. This is the slide that you saw. That's our portfolio. Johan showed how are we relevant with that portfolio for industrial IoT. Those are the components that at this moment are playing the role in our service provider offering, and how do we fulfill the requirements of different use cases. And to finalize, we talked about 3 E's. Thank you, Stefan. What we do, no. There was a bunch of, doesn't matter. Okay. There is so many more logos. Apparently the versions of the presentation are not there. But we look at the business development of those opportunities or those scaling engines in 3 dimensions, right? So we explore, we look at those elements where we look at what we have without developing a wheel or reinventing the wheel from scratch, trying to figure out, okay, this is our technology, what are the use cases that we can fulfill? Then we're trying to find the partners that we can talk to make sure that we get access to the scaling engine. This was ARM relationship, and it formulated the relationship with telco systems, and we have a bunch of other discussions with companies like Amperi in US, like Enea in Sweden, about global rollout of ARM architecture-based solutions. So this is happening, and this is here. Those logos are supposed to be here. We have something that's already established, and where we have business coming from, but we're trying to expand. So for example, with Nokia, we started with one single use case. They wanted us to do the backhaul security out of all the use cases that you saw. But then slowly but surely, we expanded into explaining, we basically went into explaining Nokia, okay, those are the other things that you can still do with us. And within Nokia, there are a bunch of different divisions. There's Nokia Software, there's Nokia Networks, there's other elements where we are very relevant. But we have to take this route and actually talk to them and make sure that they understand the value that sits in the solution that they are OEMing. And that's a long road, but we're getting there, and we're getting access to additional use cases, like, for example, SD-WAN. Same thing with Ericsson. And then, Enhance is actually making sure that we are as efficient in our relationship with a partner as possible. And that's the approach. That's the model that we're trying to take. You saw this picture. This is our traditional channel model that we go to market with in terms of our enterprise solutions. Specifically with service providers, we are concentrating on OEMing. We could go head-to-head with Palo Alto, with Fortinet, with Checkpoint, and say, okay, guys, we have all these advantages in terms of our technology, but the reality is we don't have muscle for it. So we have to be really smart. How do we approach the market? And our engine is this. That's how we do it. Nobody else does it in the way we do it. There's no other OEM that Nokia, Ericsson, and others have. And this is very important. From the Nokia perspective, just to give you an example, when they sell a solution to the customer, they look at their sales margin. Specifically within the Nokia Software group, they have a very ambitious leader that wants to have Nokia Software as 95% margin company. So you cannot do that when you sell Palo Alto Box as a reseller with 20% margin. That destroys your entire business case. So this is where we come in, because not only we deliver what's needed, but we are flexible enough to cater into that specific business need that they have. So we grow in scale, and that's the concept of it. That's it from me. Questions for the panel? Yeah, thank you very much.
So the majority of you in the room I've met already, and we've known over the course of my 2.5 years with Clavister. When I started with this company, it was a company in need of an identity. it was struggling to find its identity. Are we a product company or a platform company? Are we an enterprise company or a telco company? How do we scale? How do we grow? Should we just continue to focus on technology? Unfortunately, many of you shareholders who bought in 2015 and 2016 had experienced a negative impact of a company struggling to find its identity. That's unfortunate. When John and I set out on this mission, we said first and foremost, we need to address our culture as a company. We need to have basic ground rules and principles in this company. For example, we don't talk about things unless we do them. We don't show our successes unless they're real. That's number one contract between the employees, the management, the board. Speaking of the board, the one word that is said consistently at our board meetings is focus. Focus. We have to prove ourselves day to day. Just so that we all understand, we're working in a market today that is in upheaval. This market is transforming on a daily basis. We're a small company based in Övik. At the same time, in that one location, we have more than 25 nationalities working with us. We are a global company. But the only way that we can maintain our credibility with our enterprise clients, with our scaling partners, is if we deliver on our promises. That's our culture. That's our culture today. The other element of our culture is that we don't do things unless we can monetize them, which was a massive departure from where we were before. If we cannot apply a dollar figure or a euro figure or a krona figure to what we do, we don't do it. Because why are we here? We're here to deliver shareholder value. How do we do that? We make more money than we spend. How do we get there? We get a lot of really smart people into a room, either in the form of a board of directors or in the form of a management team, and get them to focus on delivering our strengths, on communicating our opportunities, and delivering what we promise. It's been a tough transition. And you may or may not be happy to hear the transition's not over. It's far from over. This transition will never be over if we do our jobs right. But one thing that I can assure every shareholder and potential shareholder in this room is that as long as this team is here, you will see focus. You will see professionalism. You will see us driving to take on every opportunity we see. And hopefully you see there are a lot of opportunities. We don't have enough staff to take on all the opportunities we see. So what do we do then? We focus on those areas that we believe can build the biggest bang for the buck, that can get us into that growth phase, that can help us take advantage of the broccoli effect and drive into new areas of potential. But the only way we can do that is if we deliver on our promises and we focus. So hopefully, since our last Capital Markets Day last year in April, the people that have attended that last time see the changes that we've executed as a team, see the new opportunities that we've been able to bring to bear. You saw no blue sky today. Everything that we presented is a contracted opportunity. Every use case that we've shown exists. It's something that we are delivering to the market on a day-to-day basis. The question always comes up, well, if we have so many scaling opportunities, why are we doing this enterprise business? The enterprise business is our credibility. That's what these scaling partners buy into. They see the relevance of these solutions in the market, and they see that they have an ability to scale those solutions in ways that we can't. We brought a concept to the table last year at our Capital Markets Day: innovate, replicate, scale. Hopefully you've seen today the innovation that this company has done in the last 20 years has delivered us a platform, unlike the majority of the players in the market. The ability to replicate has driven our growth for the last 11 quarters. What you're going to see happen during the course of the next 11 quarters is how we manage our scaling. It's not going to be easy. It never is. It's a tough market. It's a market, as I said earlier, in upheaval. However, if any team can do it, I believe this one can. I bet on this team every single day I come to work. These people can do it, and hopefully you've seen that as well today. So with that, I think we should open up for questions.
Well, thank you for the presentation here. It's been very interesting to follow the development. One area that I'm still curious about that you haven't mentioned is a simple question that you might be able to answer, and that is, does Huawei have a backdoor in their 5G equipment, and who else has? And if so, how do you protect from that?
Take that.
Great question.
We have not examined Huawei equipment to know for sure. But if you look at the legislation that exists within the countries, we have US and they have their Patriot Act, right? So that means that certain things need to be a telecommunications solution so that the Patriot Act as a law can be executed. That's backdoors. Exactly the same law exists in China, exactly the same law exists in Russia, and exactly the same law exists in Israel. That's it.
Can you protect against that?
Can we protect against backdoors in Huawei system?
I don't think so.
I don't think we are in this business.
Because they're backdoors, if I'm not mistaken. Shemek has actually authored a paper about this subject, which you should read, and we can send that in an email afterwards. But I guess the question of the backdoors, it's in the equipment of the providers. But John, maybe you can answer that.
Yeah, I have my mic. Just as Shemek mentioned, if a competitor delivers let's call it a flawed product into any network, that's the contract between that supplier and that customer, obviously. And our business is not to protect people from other vendors' mistakes, if they are our competitors. We're there to support the customer. If they choose to work with us, they deploy our equipment. So that's our key business. And I think we can mention just another practical example that we experienced just 1 week ago. One of our colleagues is currently working with a Swedish agency, without naming them, and they were hands-on experiencing showcased demonstration of a very, very large, famous US vendor of network equipment, and how the NSA literally have access to those boxes. And this is an agency that's basically here to protect this country, and they are in the hands of NSA. So absolutely it happens.
Yes? Yes. That's it.
Peter, did you have a question?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it's impressive to hear about you. I more and more see that you are number one in Europe, second to none. Okay. Question. You have you say sometimes ambition, but I hope it's a goal that you should reach 1 billion SEK at the end of December 2022. Are you still believing in that, or some delay?
24th of December or 25th of December. No, so I mean, our ambition really is, again, to build this company into a leading vendor in Europe, leading European vendor. What does that entail? Obviously, at 100 million SEK, we're not a leading vendor in Europe. We have to grow our revenues, our business substantially to the point where we are a vendor to count with, right? If that level is 1 billion, 1.2, 0.8, or even 5 billion, that's for us to see. But I mean, the ambition is to grow to those levels. I mean, that's clear. Otherwise, we should not be in this business. We have so many opportunities. We have the products to support it. We have the activities on the market that support it. So if we're not getting to those levels or above, we're in the wrong business or we're doing the wrong things.
Okay, you talk a lot about focus. It's very, very good. Your focus market, I thought, was Nordic countries and Germany and Japan. But today I didn't hear anything about Japan. Have you given up there, or it's a huge market?
It is a huge market, as is China, as is many other markets in the world. We have fantastic business relationships with really, really interesting customers in Japan. Entity BP being one of the more significant ones, where we scale our business with them. More or less every quarter we advance our relation. They're using our products in critical infrastructure, not only in Tokyo, but throughout and across the entire country in Japan. So we are currently deployed in railway stations, in trains, at the new stadiums they're building, and in retail shops that they operate as service providers. They have literally transitioned from being a early customer to us into a key account. And we would like to drive that account and others as key accounts. Japan, a fantastic market, massive market, but we need to place our bets. And as you might have seen as well, we withdrew from China, and that's again a focused decision. Plus, it happens to be very well aligned with our ambition to be an independent European supplier. So focus more on Nordics. That's why we're scaling our Nordics team heavily, focusing on the German-speaking region, same thing, scaling, and all other customers, all other partners. We have 500 partners worldwide. We can't have staff everywhere. So we support those partners and our global key account customers from a more, let's say, consolidated team here in Sweden. So that's how we see the nature right now.
Good. I have a lot, but I'll take another one. Nokia has said that you are best in class, and I understand that you are best in class still in the communication service provider sector. The Nokia has won about 50 business this year and up and running like 20 this year in 5G. When can we see any licensing money to your company, our company, Clavister?
Yeah, so I'd say it's coming. It's not supposed to come, it is happening. So, it is happening more now as a run rate business than anything else. Just to, you saw those numbers, right, in terms of prediction of the throughput from a real operator. One of the projects that because one of the things that we've done over last year, for example, in September last year, we had no professional services business with Nokia. Right now we are building, we have engagements on the projects that they are deploying. And this has happened because when they thought that they can go ahead and deploy our software, unfortunately it wasn't that easy. So this was our advantage because we know how to do it. So we basically go out there and we are at the customer sites wearing our own badge, Clavister, deploying our stuff. So we know how those projects go. So one of the example that I mean right now is actually in deployment for 2 years. And that's how long it takes before you see that year one throughput starting to happening. And keep in mind that our first commercial transaction through Nokia happened in the first quarter of 2017. So that's unfortunate lead time, but we, the great thing about it is that we are now hands-on engaged in those deployments. It's not us saying, okay, dear Nokia, what do you have on the horizon? And whenever they have time, they answer. We are with them there. So that's important. The other thing is, we already have proof. Always we were saying, okay, we built our licensing to make sure that we lower the entry point for our technology so that we get market share. That's why we have those 20-something joint customers or pilots, because not all of them are commercial. But we already see orders coming in for additional capacity, meaning the networks are starting to be filled with traffic. That's what we want to see. That's what we're waiting for. But it's if you look at the number of how many deals Nokia won in terms of 5G deployments, for example, that doesn't mean necessarily that every single one is us, because you may have a customer that says, "I'm working with this security vendor, and I want you to deal with that."
How often are you included? 50% or?
I don't know the number right now, but
Roughly?
what happens is unless there is a specific request from the customer that the Nokia needs to work with our competitor, we are always included in the proposal. Then what happens is those deployments are there's many elements in those projects, and security is a fragment of it, and not even the biggest, 5% maybe of everything that happens. So when the contract is won, then the deployment starts, and before security is getting introduced into the project, sometimes it's 18 months. And then you have another 12 to 18 months before it's deployed. So those are unfortunate lead times, but this is no different. If you look at, from the past, if you look what happened between 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, it's exactly the same time. From the moment the technology is introduced to the moment where you have, I would say, broad commercial availability, this is always anything between 5 to 8 years.
Vidar, that's a very good question, and
Last.
He has to have a mic, but I'll bring it back to you, Vidar, promise.
as a bit of follow-up to that, we addressed this question in the last Capital Markets Day that we had run, and John showed a slide with basically an S-curve, showing this is how much time it takes to get deployment going, and then we start seeing engagement and ramp up, and then it's going to taper off after a while. And the more S-curves that we can put in place, the more potential scaling growth we see. We've been able to take that operating model, and we've been able to take the product that we've deployed with our partnership with Nokia, and we've been able to replicate that operating model with other vendors. So what that means is that we're not only looking at S-curves coming from our Nokia relationship, we'll be looking at S-curves coming from other partnerships with other deployments. And this is where we're replicating these models so that we can eventually scale. And this is exactly what Przemek was presenting today. We've taken technology that we've innovated. We've taken an operating model that was unlike any other operating model in the market, which is why they had come to us as a commercial operating model. And now we're replicating it for scale. This is where the opportunity is, but we have to focus. If we cannot, once again, we do not have the size of team, nor the bandwidth, nor the capability of addressing every opportunity we see, which is why Przemek and team spend so much time qualifying and looking for areas that we can very easily replicate to scale. Does that make sense?
I also finally ask, you have, as we understand, cooperation, of course, with Ericsson. Has you this roughly the same cooperation in service provider section with Ericsson as you have with Nokia?
In terms of the use cases, absolutely, yes.
Because you see Ericsson take more and more in the 5G section.
Yeah, and those are the same exact use cases that I showed you. There is no difference whether this is Ericsson, Nokia, Tata, whatever. It's all the same stuff. It's just, historically we've been more engaged and we spend more time developing Nokia relationship. Now we need to do the same, and we're doing the same with Ericsson, but the scale is different, but it's happening. Yeah, and the use case is exactly the same. So that's the whole point. We are not trying to invent something new with a new partner, because it's going to take undefined amount of resources that we don't have, and we have to be really careful how we spend them. So we take what we have and we replicate it through the channels that we identify and qualify at those that have the shortest time to revenue possible. That's the idea.
As you have the best, it seems that no problem to reach the 1 billion at 22.
To answer your question,
With
I don't see
partners.
I don't see a problem in reaching 1 billion. When it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But
What do you think? Probability 80% or?
to reach it. To reach it.
Probability to reach 1 billion.
To reach 1 billion,
Yeah.
probability is 100%.
22.
I
Wonderful.
I cannot.
I have to go out and buy some more
I
shares,
cannot
think.
tell you.
Exactly,
I cannot
that's the
tell
right
you when
answer.
it's going to happen. But you understand that this is not something that we said, okay, by that date specifically, this is what we want to do. It's a checkpoint. It's a milestone that we have to reach to become relevant on the market, so that we are not the statistical error. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We want to be relevant. We want to get market share, and when we have that number, then this is our goal, basically.
We have a question up here.
Hi. So a question about scaling through partners. If obviously your professional services organization is a great source of income for you right now, but if Clavister people is required on the operator sites in order to deploy your security solution, how should we think of this in terms of like this being a bottleneck for you going forward?
It's not a bottleneck at all. It's a great opportunity for us because, first of all, of course, in every solution you develop, there's a lot of theory that then you really take advantage of actually checking in the real world. And one of the examples was Nokia deploying our stuff, but then we didn't have really hands-on. We kind of had a second view. Now we are there. We are verifying. We are fine-tuning what we are actually delivering based on what we hear from the customers themselves. And in terms of us scaling that's not a problem, because we scale our organization as we need. In terms of professional services, I think what is important is that having that hands-on approach or relationship with the customers, we identify and create new business for us. Because if you look at the portfolio, which, if you remember, when we met last year, did not even exist. Now we have it, and a lot of elements that are currently not there for the service providers are still valid, and we need to make sure that we enhance or expand our relationship with those through those services. And through professional services engagements, we identify those needs because we have direct relationship with the customers. That's very valuable.
Also keep in mind, Eric, that for every deployment that our partners do, of course, they gain knowledge, right? So it's not that we become less important for the deployments, it's just that we move our position to the next use case. And the next use case, just remember that the operators that we are supporting with our partners right now, this is very new material for them. So there's a learning curve, there's a threshold. As soon as they're over that for the initial use cases, they can replicate. They have much bigger professional services organizations than we have. And then we can, as Przemek mentioned, we can also, of course, continue to scale our teams so we can take on more missions. Our end game, of course, we're not becoming a consultancy organization, but having a healthy mix with some degree of consultancy that will, for those specific reasons, attach ourselves closer to the end customers, gaining knowledge of the market, being there to drive business and gain more use cases. So it's a very healthy balance there. But our partners will have to do the lion's share of deployments, of course.
I'd like to ask one question for Staffan and Johan, if you don't mind, and then I'm going to come back up to you guys. Staffan, how, there's the fixed and mobile convergence happening in an IoT space. How does the mobile carrier approach the IoT situation and offer solutions? And Johan, you can follow up on that. So how is that working together?
So you mean the operators, the telcos?
Yes.
What we see in the factory automation, I would say that probably 90% of the communication is by wire, because this is the traditional way, that is the highest reliability at the moment. But we see a trend that there comes more and more wireless today about Wi-Fi, short-range Bluetooth, and these kind of things. And these technologies have not really been designed to carry on communication with AGV, for example. There's a lot of AGV applications inside logistic warehouses based on Wi-Fi. It doesn't work well. It works quite lousy, actually. 5G will change that. The problem we have when we talk to big industrials like Volkswagen, they say, we are Volkswagen. We can't work with guys like Deutsche Telekom. They work with consumers. Do you expect that we will sit in their hotline waiting for them to help us with support? We want to own our own infrastructure. Of course, that's a different game when it comes to network slicing and these kind of things, but there's big debate about how do they deploy 5G in the industries. We shouldn't talk about licenses, but man, that's a big topic for these guys and the operators, so it's very unclear. And I think the European operators, they really say that we failed with M2M communication and we are about to fail to understand the industry and their needs. So the technology is there, but the ecosystem is still very unclear.
Yep. And yet it's an interesting topic because the telcos are looking for new revenue streams, and this was a very hot topic. Johan.
The good thing for us is that we are on both sides. So whatever the industry come up with, and we work with IT and OT, we will protect on the edge, close to the machines. And then on the 5G network, we are also being involved with that with Nokia and Ericsson, protecting the edge there. So it's all about making sure that the communication are secure so that we can get the Volkswagen, those people to trust the security. I think by going it through the OT-IT way, we'll get closer to them because then they are fixed connections to start with. When the 5G is up and running, we are much closer to that. So I think we are a good cater for it.
I think so too. There's some questions up here. There you go.
Thank you. Hi guys, and thank you for the presentations. Looking at the communication service provider segment, scaling and the S-curve is one thing, but even more important for now is the customer intakes or new orders from new customers. And looking during 2019 compared to 17 and 18, the pace of customer intake has slowed down. And I guess my question is why?
Back, and it sounds like that's a good one for you, John, I guess.
I can start off and then Shemay can complement. To start with, we are not anymore, and I'll come back to the reasons, we're not communicating every single end customer win. And the reason is, there are two reasons for it. The first one is they are actually not our customers, right? Our customer is our partners, the likes of Nokia and Ericsson and Tata. And when this market is growing and they add on more and more operators, it becomes an information leakage problem where a sub-supplier like ourselves would be communicating to the market regarding their wins. And soon enough, you could derive pricing information, competitive information, which is fairly unhealthy. So for that specific reason, and also the reason that we're now having CSP being 20% of our business, any new operator deal starts becoming a bit of a run rate business into this. So we're more focusing now on making sure that the vast amount of operators that already signed up, that they get deployed and start using the products. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter if we add another 20 and they don't go live. I mean, that's just money wasted for us. So out of those plus 20, 25 or what it might be, operators, we're seeing now, and just as Remek mentioned, the initial orders we received, the initial very first operator that placed an order for this solution through our partners or our partner Nokia, they went live now in June, so 2 years later. So there's long tail business, and out of those, that existing backlog of 20 plus operators, we foresee that there is a staged approach where several of them will now start going live, which will trigger not only professional services revenue, which is of course good, but more important, additional licenses. Because what they bought initially, it's just the entry level capacity to get started. And if those numbers that Przemek showed from a real operator, if they hold true for all the others, of course the expectations from our side is that we will multiple those levels through deployed operators. And then we have to realize that out of those 20 plus, there will be some that won't make it. They won't go live. They chose something else. They might not even have chosen a Nokia solution or an Ericsson solution, maybe a Chinese solution. So that's a simple answer. We keep see orders coming. We keep see new operators. We don't announce each and every one unless there is a massive transformation, obviously.
Yeah, if I can just interject, to John's earlier point, one of the most frustrating things I experience as being on the board here and being a conduit to shareholders is the fact that there are many wins that we have that we just can't communicate. For a number of reasons. Sometimes it's an OEM partner that doesn't want their customers to know they're using third-party product to protect their equipment or their services. Other times it's, as John said, our customer is the partner. It's not the end client. And I had this exact same problem when I was with Cisco. The difference, though, is that at the scale where Cisco operates, they can do that. At the scale where we operate right now, I would love to be able to, and I'm sure the whole team will concur, to be able to broadcast every win that we have, every new partnership that we have, every growth opportunity we have. But we have to respect the fact that many of these partners don't want that out there. The important thing, though, and this is, as I had mentioned earlier, what you saw today is deployed. What you saw today is in the market. What you saw today is on a price list. What you saw today is something that is actively being utilized by our partners and customers. That's where the opportunity is.
Will it show up in the Q3 report?
Some, yes. But once again, what is it that we can communicate to the market? Some will just be, growth. And I would like to see more of it. And I think John can attest to that. Our aspirations are there and they're solid, and our aspirations are written in sand. We want to become that 1 billion SEK company.
And also keep in mind that the majority of our run rate business is transactional of nature or by nature, where from the top of my head, last year we closed some 5,300 customer orders. And that tells you something about the average deal size, which is fairly limited. And of course, it doesn't make sense for us to communicate all of those because then we start diluting the message. And instead we like to focus on those growth opportunities when it comes to communication, things that are positively disruptive for the business. And then the run rate business is just, hopefully just continue to grow and build the substantial growth and the critical mass of the company.
Hey guys, first of all, thank you very much for doing this, highly appreciate it. To kind of take a longer perspective, this has been a long journey and you guys have been in place now for a while. I think John has been there for 2 years, a bit more than 2 years as a CEO, and Victor as well as a chairman. I've been inside companies, I've been shareholders in companies. There's sometimes a disconnect. There's a lot of moving parts in the business. You leave China, the communication service does this market does that. There's a lot of difficult words to try to understand. What I want to know is at what point is the conviction high enough to be able to go out with real forecasts and numbers, not on a quarterly basis, But I think you guys have been there for long enough now and built a team with the new CFO in place to be able to do that. And I feel that there is a disconnect between the operational conviction that you have and the financial conviction you seem to have. And at some point that needs to change. And I'm wondering where that inflection point is, because we had this conversation a year and a half ago as well. You guys have performed. There's only 30 people sitting here. I have a respect for most of them, but it should be 300 people sitting here. So you're a startup doing a turnaround in a public environment. And so you need to kind of have a view on that, and I'm sure you've discussed it. I would love to know where you are on that. But again, a huge thank you for doing this, and I think it's great to showcase what you're doing.
Victor, good compliment. You're absolutely right. There has to be that inflection point coming, and it has to come sooner rather than later. When we talk to new institutional investors and we explain the company, the natural question is, oh, you've been around quite a long time. Yes, we have, 20 plus years. It has its drawbacks, but also some benefits. From the investor point of view, the benefit is obviously the majority of your tech investments are behind you. You spent 60 million euros plus in software R&D over these 20 years, and now we just have to monetize that. So in essence, we're looking at a company which is before 2017 and after 2017. And that point has nothing to do with me personally or Victor personally. It's just the starting point of a transformation, of a new journey. We had this discussion several times with the board and in the management team. When is the point when we should start doing proper guidance to the market? And going back 1 year, we didn't have enough proof points. It was too volatile still. Even though the outlooks and everything looked promising, we had a business plan that we believed in, and we're still operating on that, the very same. But we didn't have the data points, and we had the history against us, so we couldn't really start doing predictions and then fail on them. We didn't have that luxury. Now we have 11 quarters of growth and proof points, and we were joking that, okay, is 11 quarters enough or is it 13? And Victor pointed out that if this would have been the US, 2 had been enough. But this is not US, and you know, we have a legacy. So sort of that's the discussion, that's the thought process within the company. But you're absolutely right, and there is no disconnect that we have to get to that point. We would be happy to come to a point where we start not on a quarterly basis because it's too volatile and we have factors that we can't control still, but on the bigger type of objectives, whether it's top line growth within certain range, whether it's EBITDA levels on a certain level, absolutely, we have to get there. When it comes to timing, maybe Victor has some clever words to finalize on that.
It's got to be something staged, Omid, and the way that's going to work is, first, I think we've got to radically simplify the way we report to the market. And that's something that we'll be exploring with the board for the second half of the year or remainder of the year. And now that we have a new CFO on board, Håkan's come in with some very good ideas as to how we can do that. Once we have gotten beyond a radical simplification of what we report to market, then I think it'll be a lot easier for us to rely on different elements of the business where we can be more predictable. And once again, I was talking about culture earlier. One important element of our culture, which John and I have been, screaming in the boardroom for, the last 2.5 years, is we have to be ultra predictable internally. We should be completely unpredictable in the face of our competitors, but for our customers, our colleagues, our shareholders, we have to be ultra predictable. And we're getting to that point. We're not all the way there yet. And as I think you've seen the performance to date, some markets take off, other markets slow down. Some activities, come to fruition in a big way in a quarter. Others, aren't. It's almost a predictable lumpiness in the business, but the growth is there. So if we can find a way to simplify a bit as to how we report that, that's going to help us in becoming more predictable in how we discuss that in an open forum. especially with our shareholders. But to your other point, 300, 3,000, 30,000, it doesn't make a difference. If you look at the changes that have been made in our capital structure during the course of the last 2 years, it's pretty significant. And I think it's something to boast about. We've thankfully been able to maintain a lot of our family offices and retail shareholders while at the same time drawing in a number of institutional shareholders. And we're not at the balance that we'd like to be yet, but we're really getting there. And that's providing stability around the share price performance. Those are good things. It's still a very too volatile for my liking, the stock, but we're getting to a more disciplined, structured setup. We have to address some things in how we report to the market. We have to address some things in how we set expectation, but we're getting there.
And I was thinking maybe even Staffan might have an opinion on that. Please ask him.
Thank you for those points. I agree. Just as a final recommendation, maybe, I think, the company before you guys joined had a pretty rocky history with overpromising and maybe not performing. However, I sort of feel like we've gone to the other side of the extreme and have been there for too long. And I think the perception is that if you make a mistake, that's unforgivable by the capital markets. That's obviously not true. And I think what happens is that the shareholders that are loyal suffer for it instead and have to pay the price for your conservativeness. So again, I think that balance, if we kind of come to the middle of the spectrum, would be more helpful to everyone. And I hope that we'll get there sooner rather than later. The first point would be, around break even, which seems to be an important point for you guys on EBITDA. Some communication around that, maybe not today, but in the near future would be really, really helpful and a good start, I think. Thank you.
And just maybe Staffan might have an opinion on this subject.
Well, I'm here really as a CEO of HMS, as a partner of Clavister, but as you know, I'm also part of the board and I'm also a small shareholder. But I think it's key as well. I've seen this before. We can't run this company by a lot of promises for the future. We in the board, our mission is to create focus for the management team. We have a fantastic management team. They are running the business and we can inspire them, we can coach them, and Victor's doing a great job there to make sure that they can inspire their team to be happy, high-performing individuals to create great product, great innovation, to have great customers. If we can get this, we will have a fantastic success. If we have a fantastic success, we will increase our revenue. If we increase our revenue and have an eye on the cost, we will generate profit. Then we'll be successful. But guys, there's a lot of steps until we are successful. We are on the right track, but communicating a lot of things to shareholders at this moment, this is not our focus. I talk for myself here. We need to support the management here. They run the business. They're doing a great job here, but it will take some time before we can harvest the success. But now it's a time of hard work and discipline in the company. That's my honest opinion here. And I'm a shareholder, but this is not a share that you... The day traders don't like this share because this is a long-term investment. It's not harvesting time. It's really disciplined, focused, hard work at this time. In a couple of years, maybe 5 years, or whatever.
Or maybe the day traders like it because it's sustainable, unpredictable at this moment.
Yeah, but it's not harvest time. We need to work hard, and that's what we're doing at the moment.
Thanks. And I think it's good to ask tough questions, so the questions are appreciated. Who would like to speak next? Yep, bring it up.
If you could talk some more about the competitive landscape in the CSP and the telco space. You show some great performance figures. I guess they're a couple of years old now. Where are we now, and what are you seeing? You talked about some operators choose another solution. And how competitive are you still as compared to a couple of years ago, and what are you seeing like in the years ahead?
The product itself, thank you. You're a really good runner. You're not. Okay, we're still listening to Chemec, we're still competing with a lot of box sales from the competition. So what you saw on the graph, yes, they are a little bit old. We have also upped the performance on our side. So yes, we will update those. We're actually going into much more external testing together with likes like Intel. We have a relationship with a company called NSS Labs that does this on a more independent scale that we've done so far. So we're gonna produce more of these comparative reports on our performance. But again, we are competing with the Palo Altos that move in big boxes. They don't go into the virtualization as we do because they are dependent when it comes to performance, that the product runs on a RISC processor, which actually up the speed in some of the areas that you need to protect. But because of that also is that they have a really tough time going to the virtualization because they are dependent on that RISC processor in a COTS environment. They don't have the special built RISC processor because then it's not coming off the shelf. So going into the UCP business, we are well catered for it. But still, it is the operator that decide, and they might have bought the black boxes already. So going completely virtualized, that's the story that Chemix is talking about. It takes some time because they need to transform the full business, and security is not the first part that they transform to go virtualized totally. So we are still by far one of the best when it comes to virtualized performance. That's the reason why we are still within Nokia, we're still within the Ericssons alike. So, but the scale up is still, we're competing with boxes.
And add to that as well, exactly what Chemec pointed out, and which is public information from ARM. The reason why those guys chose Clavister is because there is no one on the market that can demonstrate the same range of capabilities, capacity, and scale with that footprint that fits on an ARM architecture. There is just no one else, and we do it.
But then I'll give you, to answer your question about competitiveness and a specific example where we are not in our, let's say, comfort zone, but we still do the job. So we have a customer together with Nokia, and customer said, I don't care what it is in terms of security solution, but I want big iron, meaning not virtualized solution, but something that's dedicated. And that was Palo Alto as our competitor, which was like a first choice because they are the big iron supplier, right? But then again, we talked about Nokia and sales margins, how careful they are in counting their money, which is a great thing for them to do. And they said, would you consider a big iron solution with a different software? And this has not been a use case that has been internally approved by Nokia. So Nokia product management said, no, we don't support that. But we said, guys, there's no problem. We do it. No problem. And it's being deployed now. So that gives you the certain perspective. So we are no longer racing with those guys whether or not we are equally good. We can totally do the same thing. It's now making sure that there is an understanding and awareness within our partner ecosystem that's much better option for them to make money. That's it. And I guess we're going to have, there's a bunch of other examples like this where, and it's beauty of that platform, this is why I joined this company, because it has a product that's so versatile. You don't have to reinvent the wheel to make new business. You just apply it to the new use case. That's it.
That's a super valid point, and to your point, Omid, when you see all those presentations, all those acronyms, all those use cases, it's massive, and it sounds like it's contradictory to focus. And focus for Clavister has been, and it still is a journey. It's a transition, and you've been part of the shareholder community for a while, so you know the history. When just take sales as an example, we had salespeople scattered all around the globe, but very few headcount, no critical mass, no sustainability in the growth we were doing there. Focusing back to few markets in Europe, that's one part of the focus puzzle. Focusing on 5 verticals instead of unlimited, that's also part of the focus journey. Focusing on a few use cases that we have deployed, that we can demonstrate, also focus journeys, but it's still a lot of acronyms, still a lot of stuff that we're presenting. The good thing though, all of those stem from the same software platform. And that's a super important message. We have the same software for all customers, for all use cases, for all partners. There are no deviations, no custom-built software, and that's one focus area that we never deviate from.
Amen. And that equals margins.
Yes.
That's probably a perfect way to end this. It is 12 o'clock. We do have wraps upstairs for you. If there is one last question, I guess we could field one last one. But if not, I'm going to take Ahmed up on his challenge. I think next Capital Markets Day, now with Håkan in place, we are going to double the number. I was actually thinking that this is too good not to have more people in this room. So I can actually put place a KPI on myself that we're going to have double the number next year. So thank you.
I'm going to miss you on that.
I was going to say, I'll take your challenge.
And it's ideally not going to happen in Q4 either, because these people should be out selling right now.
No, it won't be. It'll be plenty.
Should invite the press?
Yes. We had a press
For
inquiry,
this
but
industry.
totally agree.
There's a lot of nice information for,
Totally agree.
for the industry and for Sweden.
Yes. Yes. I think it's this is an amazing company for Sweden to be proud of. And thank you, of course, for being investors and believing in the journey. Thank you, speakers. Thank you, audience.